Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinzler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very well. And now the weather's taken a turn.
Yeah.
And were you able to get all your yard work done?
There's always more to do, but I got the mowing done. I cleaned out some pots. So, yeah, I feel okay. Okay. Good. Yeah, I'll have to go around now, and some of those, again, the coleus were just holding on in there, and some of my sweet potato vines were still doing really pretty well. So now that now the cold has come, I'll really have to pull them out, but that'll be fine. It's easy to do.
Yeah, in our own perennial garden, some of the perennials that I do cut back, like peonies, hosta, daylilies, iris, they looked so nice and so green yet that I just didn't have the heart to cut them down.
Yeah.
And so I need to do that. And so rather than doing it on a very nice 60-degree day, now I'll be out there shivering. But at least I'll feel better that now, the end is here. I need to cut those down.
Now we know. Hey, Don, last week we were talking about pumpkins, and there was one question I forgot to ask you.
What's that?
How did the pumpkin get across the road?
I don't know.
The crossing gourd. So like we've been talking about, the weather has changed. I think we can safely say the outdoor gardening season.
I think the growing season has come to an end.
Has come to a close. We won't even tell people that, yes, you can still go out there and plant.
Because it's always amazing to me, like as we're taping this today, temperatures, I think the high is only going to get 35, and then for the next 5-6 days, highs maybe in 30s, lows in the maybe teens, 20. And it's also amazing to me how quickly the soil freezes. The soil's been warm up till now, but at a certain point it loses its heat and you can't get a shovel in the ground any longer. So very quickly that's going to happen.
One quick question then is for people who still have carrots or potatoes in the ground or root vegetables in the ground, is now the time to get them out, or can we still hold on even after after the ground freezes?
Because I would include me in that. I have not dug our carrots yet because I wanted the cool temperatures, because we didn't have that much cool temperatures. I wanted the cool temperatures to favor the buildup of sugar so that the carrots got sweeter. Mm-hmm. And so I've left them in the ground. And, but now here's the trick. Okay, the cool temperatures are going to favor the sweetness, buildup of sugars. But at a certain point here, we're not going to be able to get a shovel in the ground because that soil is going to be frozen solid. And now carrots can handle that. So next spring, as soon as the soil thawed, you could dig those. But you've got to dig them right as soon as the soil thaws. But now many of us want to eat those carrots during the winter time. One thing that we can do, one thing, I'm going to dig ours here this weekend before the soil freezes solid. I'm going to dig them and put them in storage. But for someone that doesn't want to dig them all right now, you can cover them with leaves or straw before the soil freezes, and that will keep the soil thawed, unfrozen, so that you could go in. And some people will do that, cover it with 12 to 24 inches of straw or leaves, and that will insulate the soil enough so you could probably dig those, if you had enough insulation, dig all winter almost. But of course, going out under a snowbank digging carrots, is, not everyone's an idea of good time. But, so you could do that. But I'm going to dig ours.
Yeah. Well, see, this is the information that this show gives people, and this is the information that people come to you a lot. And since, we just thought that maybe this would be a good time to kind of, as they say, go into the mailbag. And some questions that people have had.
Oh, and they're always fascinating. The questions we get are interesting.
I mean, is there ever a slow time for questions for you?
Really not.
Yeah.
Possibly between Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
That slows down.
People are preoccupied.
But, it's interesting, and we get nice questions. So thank you for everyone that has emailed them. It's interesting. Now, John, you and I are sitting around a round table, and there's actually happens to be a third and a fourth chair here. But it's interesting. As we talk, it's almost like you listener there, you're in one of these other chairs here. And so it's fun to get your response back with these questions and emails.
Yeah, we may not be technologically savvy enough to have a live phone line, but we can read questions on this podcast.
Yeah, so it'll be fun.
So.
We'll do question and answer today.
Yeah, so let's just dive in. This is from a guy named Tom. He writes, I viewed a short interview of a golf course spokesman on the news last night who mentioned his staff was busy spraying their golf course to prevent snow mold. I've experienced snow mold under the largest drifts of the north side of the house. What fungicide can I apply this fall to be effective in preventing snow mold next spring?
And of course, snow mold was a serious problem this last spring. It appeared in the spring after all the snow melted. Because we had snow early, it came on unfrozen ground. The ground didn't really freeze much all winter under that heavy snow, and we had deep snow. And those were ideal conditions for that fungus to live under the snow. Really didn't get that cold in the ground, and so when the snow disappeared, we had all this grayish stuff, this kind of a webbing over the grass. And in most cases, it doesn't really kill the grass, but it can. If you just fluff it up once the snow goes, it does tend to go away. But since it was so severe, many people are looking at, are there ways that we could mitigate that? And now golf courses, a wonderful turf is their business at a golf course. So they have some products, some fungicides available to them that are called restricted use. You have to be a certified pesticide applicator for some of those more potent products. So golf courses have access to those, and they're long-lasting products that if applied in the fall, they'll stay there under the snow cover and diminish the fungus that would cause this. But us homeowners don't have access to those same chemicals. There are some fungicides for lawns, but out of curiosity, I checked the labels on those, and they said that they remain active for about 30 days or less. So if applied in the fall, they're not going to have effect until next spring. So generally, applying fungicides aren't really recommended for us homeowners because the snow mold usually isn't severe enough to warrant all of us putting fungicides on our lawns.
So the better move would be just kind of wait it out and go out there in the spring, and once
as soon as the snow disappears and as soon as kind of the surface is dry enough, just with a leaf-type rake, fluff it up. And then almost immediately the fungus disappears.
Do you go by the dry enough test that if you kneel down
Definitely.
and you stand up and you're not all muddy or wet?
Yeah, if your jeans don't have a big wet spot in the knee, then you're good
dry
to
enough.
rake.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to another one. This person writes, I have voles or moles that come back every winter. They damage my lawn. They leave tons of tunnels in our grass. Do you know how to scare these varmints away?
And those voles are a nuisance. They're a little field mouse that's either brown, tannish brown, or grayish brown, and they have a very short tail. So they're different than a house mouse that are typically gray. And these voles don't really come into the house, or rarely. And so anyway, but what they do is live under the cover of snow. And during the winter, under that cover of snow, they're channeling through the grass, kind of making nests, chewing off the grass, I suppose, for something to eat. And they can, around the base of young trees, they will chew the bark off, kind of right at ground level. So they're very damaging. Now, lawns can recover, but they are a nuisance. And especially on trees, they can kill them in one winter. So how do we prevent those? A couple of things we can do. We can mow our lawn, give it a lower mowing the last 1 or 2 times. So if the recommended was 3 inches all season long, take it down to at least 2 inches, maybe a hair shorter, but not much shorter than about 2 inches, because the taller grass tends to favor their hideout. So whatever you do, don't neglect the last mowing. If you've kind of let your grass grow over 3 inches, make sure you get it down to 2 to 3 inches. So that's a key. That helps eliminate some of their habitat. And the other thing is a couple of ways. One is traps. You can use peanut butter, especially in the fall here before we get snow cover. Traps, peanut butter or peanuts on those. There are various traps that can be used. There are repellents. Now, one of the repellents, and the next question that we've got is related to this. The next question was asking, they heard about this oil that they used to use, but they forgot what it is. Well, some of the vole repellents have castor oil in. If you look at the active ingredients, they have castor oil, and castor oil is kind of a, I don't know, icky smelling. That's a good term, botanical, icky.
Yeah.
They have kind of a not a nice smell. So some of the vole repellents, when you look at the repellent, have castor oil. I suppose a person could probably buy castor oil and distribute that around as a repellent. Now, repellents are always hit and miss. They might work well for somebody, might not work for the next person, but they're worth a try.
Yeah.
So try the vole repellents that garden centers sell. The other thing that I've had good success with are poison baits. Now, the poison baits, of course, we don't want cats, dogs, kids to get into them. So I like to put those poison baits inside a PVC, a PVC tube. Maybe 12 to 18 inches long. Those voles like to kind of go into things. They like to tunnel.
Okay.
And so I found they like to go into PVC pipe, and if you include some poison bait, rodent bait in that, I've had good success with that. In fact, at some of the hardware type stores, you can buy what are called place packs in a little bucket of rodent bait. They have these little packages. They're like a waterproof package, and you just put those packs around or in that PVC pipe, and the rodents, like the voles, they'll chew into that pack. They can smell the bait, and they'll chew into that. And in the meantime, that pack stays waterproof or safe. So around trees or perennials, where I know there aren't pets or kids, I've actually just put some of those place packs, they're called. I've put some of those around. And so, do a little online search for place packs of rodent bait. And that has worked very well. Sometimes when the snow has disappeared in the spring, I'll see those packages that have been opened up and entirely eaten, and the damage that the voles started on the lawn ended right there.
Yeah.
And so I've had good success. So trapping, repellents, keeping the lawn short, that about sums it up. There's not one magic thing that will ensure the voles won't be there, except I suppose a good mouse or cat that's willing to go through snowbanks.
We'll just read that question from Sherry. A few years ago, we found a lot of damage from voles after the winter thaw. The next fall, I learned of using some kind of oil to put around the grass by all the concrete, and we didn't have any after that. What products would you recommend, and what can we do to treat the area? When you were talking about castor oil, does that come from the castor bean plant?
It does. Yeah, castor oil.
Which is, some people grow, it's a beautiful, beautiful plant, but it's very poisonous, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The castor bean plant, for those of you, and some garden centers sell these starter plants of that, or you can grow it from seed. You can order seed of it. It becomes a very beautiful tropical plant, probably 6-7 feet tall. I've grown them in the past. Something for the back of a flower garden, they're just awesome. But the seeds are toxic. They are the source of ricin, or is it ricin?
I think ricin, yeah.
Ricin. And it's a very toxic product. So one way, if you want to grow the castor plant, a little side note here, if you want to grow that to keep it from being toxic, as soon as it produces little flowers, the flowers aren't the showy part, the big leaves are the showy part. So as soon as it produces a little flower, just nip it off.
Okay.
And then it won't set seed, because it's the seed that's the poisonous part. But it's also the source of castor oil. And it's that oil that is known to have some repellent properties for rodents. And so anyway, the castor oil, if you take a look at those repellents, some have castor oil as the active ingredient. It would be kind of interesting to see, to buy castor oil. Now, some people might recognize castor oil as, when we were kids, and oftentimes in the winter, your parents, just as kind of a tonic, would give you a tablespoon of castor oil. I can still remember how awful that tasted. But apparently the castor oil isn't obviously not poisonous.
Right.
But those seeds that were, somehow specially processed, that is poisonous.
Well, one more question about lawns. This person sent in a photo. What type of mushrooms are these growing in our lawn, and are they edible?
Now, two interesting parts to that question. One, of course, is mushrooms popping up in a lawn. And this fall, when moisture returned nice, our lawn got nice and green again, also I saw some mushrooms popping up. So mushrooms, when they pop up, are living on organic or arising from organic matter in the lawn. Maybe it's an old 2x4 that's rotting from construction. They just buried some stuff. Or maybe it's an old tree root or tree stump that's underneath, or maybe it's just the fluff of the grass that's being rotted and decomposed. So actually, mushrooms, being a fungus, are beneficial because they're rotting organic material, and as they rot that, they release the nutrients back into the soil. So the mushrooms aren't harming the lawn. In most cases, these that just pop up here and there aren't doing any damage, so we can just remove them. Now, the second part of that question is interesting. Is it edible? And now, no one at NDSU is a mushroom expert because, there are a number of different kingdoms in the world of life. Okay, there's the animal kingdom, there's the plant kingdom, and there's the fungi kingdom. And I think there's bacteria and other things. But anyway, the fungi are in a different kingdom than plants. So anyway, none of us plant people at NDSU are trained in the identification of mushrooms and fungi. So I'm not able to tell anybody, yes, that's edible, or no, it's not. And of course, that's a serious issue because some of these are very poisonous.
Yeah.
And that would be a very bad deal if one of us were to guess that, yeah, that looks edible, and, that may not end well. So for anyone wondering, is this mushroom edible, or what's maybe the identity of it, there is a good resource, and it's fairly easy to search online. It's the University of Minnesota Mycology Club. Now, mycology is the study of mushrooms and fungi. So University of Minnesota Mycology Club has created a set of flashcards online. It's a very awesome, complete set of flashcards that has photos and pictures so you can self-identify these mushrooms. So you can self-identify, and if you're confident in your identification, then go ahead and eat it. And if not, I'd probably maybe suggest you don't.
Yeah, I think I would hold off. We've had some growing in our yard, and we were talking about that, and probably from roots. And that's interesting that this fall that we had so much moisture, or enough moisture to really kind of activate them so that they kind of came up from the top. It's really very interesting.
Sure, yeah, it is. It's interesting. Of course, there's kind of an old joke that all mushrooms are edible at least once. But again, since some of these mushrooms are very deadly, unless you're absolutely sure of your identity of that, the best caution is probably not to eat them.
One more mushroom question. What kind of a car does a mushroom drive?
I don't know.
A sports car. You know what kind of sound a sports car makes?
No.
Shroom, shroom. We're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, more questions from the Growing Together mailbag.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Okay, we're back, and we're taking some more questions that have been asked of Dawn recently. And so let's go into kind of the trees and shrubs part of the show. This is from Steve. He writes, every spring I deal with maple tree seedlings that sprout beneath my emerald luster maple. If I put down some preen this fall, do you think there would be any residual left in the spring?
Well, now in the past on this program, I've gone off on a passionate tangent on elm seedlings that are popping up all over our perennial flower gardens.
You are not a fan.
And in the vegetable garden, because some of these seedlings, such as elm, maples, box elder, are just the weeds. And of course, the definition of a weed is any plant growing where you don't want it. And when those elm seedlings are popping up in the middle of my peonies, I don't want them. So for me, those elm seedlings are definitely a weed. And for Steve here, he has emerald luster. That's a Norway type of maple. And so it's dropping seeds, and of course those seeds then are popping up where he doesn't want them. So how can we prevent those seeds, my elm seeds, his maple seeds, how can we prevent those from coming up where we don't want them? Well, preen, the product he mentions, preen, is the most commonly sold at garden centers, national chains. It's the most commonly sold pre-emergent herbicide. It's a granular product, and by pre-emergent, it means that that product is put on while everything is still clean, and it will kill little seedlings as they sprout. So preen has to be in place before they sprout. Okay, so that means, those maple seeds that are going to sprout next spring. So his idea, could I apply that this fall, and would it prevent them? But the problem with some of these pre-emergents are they have a certain effective lifespan. If applied in the fall here, it probably would not have an effective lifespan to prevent those seedlings next spring. Because preen, in my experience, I think the label says that it will be effective for a certain number of months. For example, when I've used preen in the spring, it doesn't last the entire growing season, but maybe a half the growing season, which is good because oftentimes the weeds sprouting in the spring, early summer, that's when they're maybe at their worst. So my concern with putting the preen down in the fall is it may not last long enough. But I would put that on in early spring. It has to go on before those maple seeds would sprout. So there will be a window in spring in which you can put that material on. Now, preen does not, a pre-emergent herbicide like that can't control everything. And so whether or not it would control tree seedlings, I don't know. It would be worth a try. I may try that in our own perennial gardens because I haven't tried it yet, but it'd be worth a try. But put it on in the spring before those seedlings have a chance to sprout.
All right. Another tree question. Bob asks, is it too early to wrap trees?
It's not too early. The preferred time is late October and early November. So we're right in the window of wrapping trees. And then they should be removed next spring, April or so, because for the growing season, a person wants the trunk of the tree, the bark of the tree, to be exposed to sunlight and fresh air so that bark and trunk becomes strong and so that no bugs and mold and things hide under the tree wrap. So now that brings up the question too is, what are some of the good tree wraps? Of course, we've all seen the either black or white, kind of the corrugated tube, plastic tube that goes on around, and those can be effective. My favorite tree wrap, though, are from the garden centers on a roll. It's tree wrap, I suppose it's probably 3 inches or so wide, but it looks like a big roll of tape, but it's not sticky. So anyway, when a person is using this roll of tree wrap, at the base, you use masking tape or duct tape and fasten it onto the base of the tree, and then you spiral it up as it's unrolling, spiral it up around the tree trunk, kind of overlapping the spirals. What I like about the tree wrap on a roll is that you can go as high as you want into the tree. So for apple trees that tend to get bark damage, fairly high up into the main branches, you could wrap that right up, kind of snake it in between some of the branches, and then up at the top, then just cut it off the roll and put some masking tape up at the top to fasten it. And that will also help for rabbits. And some of the tree wraps kind of are almost kind of like impregnated with almost a tar type material. They remind me of tar paper. some of those. And so it helps to keep the rodents and rabbits away too. So definitely wrapping, especially fruit trees, are especially harmed during winter if the trunks are left unwrapped.
Now that we're seeing, the cold, we've had a frost that's probably killed a lot of plants, and then we're going to get a hard frost that'll freeze the ground, or hard freeze rather. Yeah, I suppose that this is the time when rabbits will be more looking for other things to start eating.
Well, that brings up a good point, John. When rabbits still had green grass to eat, and plenty of stuff for them to graze, clover in the lawn and different good things, it seems like they leave some of our other stuff alone. But as soon as we get some snow cover and the grass goes dormant from the cold and they don't have much fresh greenery, it seems that's when they turn to the bark of our trees and shrubs. Yeah. And of course, so as soon as we get some snow cover, and parts of the state, part of the area do have pretty generous snow cover. But yeah, that's when the snow cover stays, that's when the rabbits start looking at our stuff.
So probably also go out and wrap your shrubs if you want to put chicken wire or things around
exactly.
Chicken wire,
roses.
Fencing. Roses.
Rabbits love roses.
Burning bush for me.
Oh boy, yeah. That's like candy to a rabbit.
Found that out the hard way last year, but it bounced back, so that was good.
Great.
Another tree question. This is from Brendan. Our ash tree has lots of flower galls on it. Would it be okay to prune them off? The tree is an eyesore with them on.
Now, flower galls on an ash tree are kind of an interesting situation. Now, ash trees actually do flower. Even the male types have male flowers. They aren't showy. You don't look at an ash tree and say, ooh, flowers. But they do have this kind of greenish flower. Well, they can be infected by mites. And when the mites infect them, they cause this flower gall, which is a brownish growth. And these brownish growths form in clusters. And during the growing season, they might be masked by the leaves. It doesn't really harm the tree, but especially in the fall, when the leaves start to fall, all of a sudden you see these growths all over up in the tree branches. It's the type of thing that when you see it, you say, oh yeah, man, flower galls up there. And they make the tree so unsightly. And so even though they aren't really harming the tree, those flower galls they look just so awful up in the tree. And that was the situation with this homeowner. The tree was growing fine, but it looked really ugly. We see bare branches quite a bit, for a fair length of time. And it even made the landscape look awful looking at that tree. Well, anyway, the question was, can he prune those out? And yes, definitely. After the tree is dormant, go ahead and prune those out.
And then that's different than pruning branches, though, right? I mean, because we don't want to be pruning branches in the fall or winter.
Exactly.
Unless you need to.
A good point again, John, because we've discussed earlier that if we do just indiscriminate pruning on trees, shrubs, roses in the fall, it leaves those wounds open and all winter long, and they're open to the drying winds and etc. And there's more chance of dieback. But as you'll notice that on very winter-hardy trees, such as ash or elm, the city forestry departments will start pruning those as soon as they go dormant, because they've got a lot of trees to prune, and you can prune those during the dormant season. But those are very hardy, established big trees, and so they'll tolerate that. My hydrangeas, I don't want to prune. My roses, I don't want to prune in the fall here because, they aren't big shade trees, and I don't want to risk things.
Yeah.
And so, so hopefully that kind of clarifies.
This is a question about an apple tree. This is from Amy. She writes, my husband and I were picking apples and we noticed quite a few had many of these black dots on them. Are these apples edible? Do you know what causes this and how to avoid it next year?
Well, the good news is, yes, the apples are edible. There's nothing that happens to an apple fruit that makes it inedible or poisonous.
Even worms?
Even worms. Yeah, it does not make the apple inedible.
Okay.
Now, as soon as she said there were black dots, and usually those black dots are accompanied by a little sunken area. And that little sunken area is where the apple maggot fly deposited eggs, punctured the skin of the apple, and deposited eggs. Then those eggs hatch into a little larvae that tunnels through the flesh of the apple during the growing season, and then that apple maggot leaves the apple sometime late in summer, early fall. And so when we usually see these apples like this with kind of black dots or these little sunken pock marks, and then you cut into them, oftentimes the interior isn't nice and white. It maybe has some streaks, discolored parts. That's where the apple maggot was feeding. But the apple maggot is gone at that point, and so the apple is free to, fine to use. Even if, I guess, if you did eat an apple early in the season when a maggot was still in there, they don't harm a person.
Extra protein.
Extra protein, yep. And so anyway, there's nothing that makes the apples inedible. In fact, I know apples that are damaged sometimes by the apple maggot. They go into a lot of applesauce and apple cider and things like that. And so you can still use them. It's certainly fine. They're not as maybe palatable for fresh eating. When I eat a fresh apple out of hand, I kind of want the flesh to be nice and white and not discolored. So anyway, as soon as she mentioned that, I'm thinking, okay, apple maggot. Oh, well, how do we prevent apple maggots for next year? Okay, and that's why it's important to spray apple trees for that when the apple maggot fly becomes active around June 20th or so. Sometime the last part of June or first part of July, the apple maggot fly starts depositing these eggs, puncturing the apple skin, depositing the eggs. So that's when we would start spraying. Now, some people say, well, gosh, I don't really want spray on my apples, but there are some good choices. And when I say good choices of spray, spinosad, which is cleared for organic use, malathion breaks down quite rapidly, and so when these sprays are used in late June, early July, you do have to repeat them, follow the labeled directions for apple maggot. You do have to repeat, but by the time you harvest, those materials are going to be broken down. They have a very safe harvest interval from the time. So by choosing the right spray insecticides, we can have both our insect control and our safety too. Because I don't want to be eating apples that have spray residue, but by choosing the insecticides safely, malathion and spinosad are good choices.
Right. Ben's got a question about strawberries. He wrote, I planted strawberry plants in a raised bed / box this summer and was wondering what I should do with them for the winter months. Should they be covered for protection? I do have access to wheat straw bales if that would be a good option, or should they be left uncovered for the winter months?
Well, when any plants, including strawberries, are put in a raised planter, it makes them more vulnerable to winter freeze-out because the cold can get in from the sides. It can penetrate from the sides of that raised planter more so than if they were in the big mass of ground at ground level. So we need to think about that. So strawberries can definitely freeze out, especially in a raised planter. So he mentioned straw. That would be great to mound over both the surface and the sides of that raised planter with straw. And so when we're talking about how much, I'd say somewhere 12 to 24 inches of straw put around. Now, when he mentions a raised planter, right away I think, strawberries in a raised planter, that intrigues me because picking strawberries isn't the easiest. There's a lot of stoop work there, or crawling around on the ground. Wouldn't it be nice to have strawberries in a raised planter about 3 feet high, so you could just stand and pick?
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Well, old Professor Neil Holland designed a raised strawberry planter that was 3 feet high.
Okay.
And it was wonderful. Picking was great. So now how did he get those strawberries to survive winter? So what he did when he was building this wooden framed planter with treated lumber, on the insides of that, before he filled it with soil, he put 3-inch styrofoam insulation.
Ah.
So build the wood frame, 3 feet high. On the inside, put 3 inches of styrofoam insulation, and then also make a top that will fit over that also has 3 inches of insulation. So his wintered beautifully, and it was also very nice for picking.
So basically, he was making a box or maybe even a coffin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, except the inside of the coffin lives instead of dies. So, yeah, it was awesome. But, oh gosh, being able to pick and harvest like that at just standing, that's good. I can see why people plant in raised beds.
Yeah, having 2 of them myself, they've made a lot of difference.
Your stock tank.
Yep.
In which you planted vegetables.
Galvanized metal stock tank, yeah.
You'll have to get another one of those for strawberries.
Yeah.
And then on the inside, just locate the styrofoam.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right, we'll take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about flowers.
When you can't make it to City Hall or school board meetings, local journalists from Inforum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at Inforum.com.
All right, this is a question from Marlene. She says, is there a way to overwinter the large mums sold at big box stores and grocery stores? Should they be planted outdoors now?
Well, when she mentioned mums, the first thing that comes to my mind is I recall when I was in junior high and enjoying gardening, my mom had mums. And I remember reading, and I remember wondering, is a chrysanthemum the same thing as a mum? And yeah, same thing. Mum is just short for chrysanthemum. So if you encounter those in reading, yeah, mum, chrysanthemum, they're same thing. Well, anyway, mums vary greatly in winter hardiness. Now, there are some mums that are winter hardy enough for our perennial flower gardens. And man, they bloom so beautifully in the fall of the year. They're blooming. Ours right now that we have in our perennial gardens are blooming under the snow. They're beautiful. So if you want a perennial mum in your garden, the main thing is to look for some of the winter hardy varieties. The University of Minnesota developed a series called the Min series. Min Yellow, Min Pink, Min Autumn, and also the Mammoth series of mums. So at a local garden center, look for those varieties, Min and Mammoth type, but also if you want them in your perennial garden to be blooming in the fall and come back year after year, they need to be planted in the springtime. And then they'll have the whole summer to establish. Now, I'm trying a new type from one of the local garden centers called the Igloo series. I bought Igloo Yellow and Igloo Burgundy. And I planted them in the spring. They're blooming beautifully now. And, of course, the trick will be, will they survive winter? I'm going to give them some covering. Now, to get to Marlene's question here, okay, she bought a big potted mum. They're so beautiful, the big potted ones. And can she plant those? Can she have hopes of getting them to survive winter? And some people have planted those, and they've come back the following spring, grown, bloomed the next fall. But you don't really know what varieties are planted in those big pots as to what their winter hardiness is. You have nothing to lose. So if you want to try, go ahead. So hopefully you can find some unfrozen soil here in which to get them planted. And by the way, much better too, if you want to try to overwinter them, yes, plant them, get them down into the ground rather than trying to overwinter them some other way.
Don't bring them inside, you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Get them down into the ground level. And so other things to help them survive winter, leave the tops intact. That's been shown very important for the survival of mums during wintertime, is to leave those tops intact because it helps prevent them from drying out and desiccating, and also it helps catch snow. To give them an extra edge, too, for Marlene, I would cover them with leaves or straw, because that's quite important with even the winter hardier varieties of mums, to give them some winter protection. And so I would definitely go ahead, plant them, try them, and see. You might be surprised.
All right. Here's an interesting one. This is from a woman named Lindell. And Lindell asks, we live in Portland, Oregon, and we will be moving back to Fargo late this fall. We will be renting a house until we can find one to buy next spring or summer. I want to try my best to bring some of the plants along with us that have been in the family for 4 generations, such as hostas, daylilies, iris, rhubarb. What is my best chance of having these plants survive winter? How do I move them and store them? Because I can't get them in the ground this fall. How should I store them?
So wouldn't it be a shame for Linnell if she can't bring these heritage-type plants back with her?
Yeah.
But, of course, the conundrum is she can't just dig them in Oregon, bring them here, plant them, because they don't have a house yet until next summer, and she's just going to be renting. So what's she going to do with these in the meantime? So what I suggested was, okay, in Oregon there, find some nursery pots. Garden centers oftentimes give you some or sell you nursery pots for a reasonable cost. Okay, so dig up the hosta, the iris, maybe divide them into something that'll fit into like a 1 or 2 gallon pot. So dig them up, pot them up, and then bring them along, haul them to Fargo. So now the question is, she won't have any spot to plant them. What is she going to do with them until next summer? Well, just assemble those pots along the foundation of the house she's going to be renting. Assemble those all along the house foundation, and then cover them with straw or leaves. Cover that whole grouping. Set them pot to pot. Along the house foundation will be a little more moderate than just out somewhere, but not on the south side because that'll have too much sun, thawing, varying temperatures. So west, east, north side of the house, assemble them along the foundation, and then cover them generously with 12, 24 inches of straw or leaves and along the edges of the pot also. And that's a standard way that many of us in the garden center trade used to winter shrubs and perennials that we had left over. That's the way we would winter them. And I suggested maybe then cover the whole works with black plastic too, just so that straw and leaves don't blow away over winter.
Yeah.
And then next, early April, uncover them. And they should have wintered well under there. And then during the summer, then water them as needed. Kind of treat them like the garden centers treat their potted stock. So actually you're kind of having your own little garden center there. And then when you've found the house that you're going to, then you'll just be able to move and plant and just treat them as kind of like nursery stock. And I think that'll work well. We had to do that when we moved our house. Because our new place wasn't ready. We wanted to bring things from the old place. So I dug them up, potted them up, just kept them in kind of a little nursery area. And then finally, months later, when the new area was ready, actually some I had to winter over like she did, and then it worked.
Yeah, and that's, that would be a shame to have something, these kind of hand-me-down plants, especially irises, things like that you've had for a long time or that maybe were given to you by somebody who's no longer around.
Yeah, because 4 generations is probably 100 some years.
Yeah.
Some of those plants might be.
So that's a good thing to know. Here's another one from Lisa. I've been using peat moss based potting mix for container gardening for 30 years. Now I'm reading a book that's describing how peat moss is non-renewable resource, at least in our lifetime. What alternatives do you suggest? I'm feeling guilty about peat moss.
Well, peat moss has been a garden staple since at least probably the 1960s. Before that, well-rotted manure was probably, you read old gardening books and they mention for your houseplants, use 1 part sand, 1 part soil, 1 part well-rotted manure. Well, we just don't do that anymore. In the 1960s, peat moss became the thing when they started harvesting the peat moss bogs. And it's a wonderful material. But of course, it takes thousands of years. Let's see, I believe it takes, I think they figured 1,000 years to make, was it maybe a foot or so of peat moss? So anyway, once we use this out of the bogs, it's going to take a long time for it to replenish. So that's a concern. So there is a good alternative, and it's called coconut coir. COIR, coconut coir. And some of the national brands of potting mix, if you look at it, it already says it contains coconut coir. And that's very renewable because coconuts, are all over the place. And, I don't have a coconut tree here.
No, maybe not all over the place, but I think we know it. They're plentiful.
Yeah, but plentiful.
And then they grow. And they grow.
Exactly. And you can, So anyway, that's something that's very regenerative. And so that's a good product. And if you look online, you can order compressed blocks of coconut coir. So for starting seeds and things, that makes a wonderful material. So if you're concerned about the peat moss and the sustainability of it, check out coconut coir.
All right. Here's a question from Connie. I have some white mold on the top of house plant soil. Is the soil too damp or not enough sunshine? Temperature of the room too cold?
Yes, usually if white mold appears, it's usually that the soil's staying too moist. And so the interval between waterings, stretch that out. And in the meantime, after the soil dries a little bit, with a fork, just cultivate the surface, and usually that mold will disappear. Or maybe just take off the top inch of soil, a potting mix, and add some fresh. Or maybe it's time to repot the whole thing, but it's usually that it's staying a little too moist. I should also mention that sometimes what looks kind of like moldy could be a salt buildup from the salts in the water, chlorine, fluorine from the water. So it might be time to repot.
Okay.
And then watch the watering.
All right. Good things to know. One more question. In April, I created a cactus garden I keep under grow lights for 12 hours a day. It has started growing some skinny tops on some of the plants. Will these fill out or just get more gangly?
Now, he did include a photo of that, and so it was a couple of different types of cactus that he had bought, and the cactus, the pads were nice and big, and then the newest growth coming off of that was very small, noticeably smaller. Okay, the first thing I noticed in his question when he mentioned 12 hours under lights, the recommended is 16 hours. The easiest way to remember that is plants are kind of like people. Our recommended sleep cycle is about 8 hours. So plants can have a dark period of 8 hours. So 16 hours of light, 8 hours of dark sleep. And so instead of the 12 hours for the plant lights, set your timer for 16. And 16 is a good length for almost anything you're growing, both a cactus or if you're starting seedlings under lights. 16 hours on would be better. And I think then he'll be getting better growth on his cactus.
I've got a question because I started doing this. I set up a little kind of a grow area to not to overwinter, but to take clippings of things like coleus and sweet potato vines to try to, so we have some to plant next spring. When I went out looking for timers, I just went to our local hardware store, and I noticed after I got back home that the timer that I bought said it was good for incandescent bulbs and LED bulbs maybe, but it didn't say anything about fluorescent bulbs. Do fluorescent bulbs need a special timer?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know the answer to that.
We'll ask around. We'll bring that back to you next week.
Yeah, let's check with an electrician. But that is a good question.
I know that fluorescent bulbs don't work on dimmers the same way a regular light bulb would.
The reason that's important, and we should bring an answer back to that.
Yeah.
Because the reason that's so important is because, if that timer isn't suited for turning on some of those, because there is certainly a difference between the fluorescents, the LEDs, incandescent. And so that's interesting.
Because if you could buy something online from a garden center, and you probably pay a bit more. That it said it's a special. Right. I mean, basically, is there a different timer for a garden versus is there a different timer for like a household lamp or something like that?
And if the timer doesn't indicate, can we use it for those?
Yeah. So
do you have an electrician friend?
I do actually, and I was just out for dinner with him the other night, so I will send him a text, and I will bring that back next week.
Oh, that'd be awesome because I want to know too, because I want to make sure that the timer that I have is suitable because I've got LEDs now.
Okay. All right.
So good.
Well, if people have questions for you, what's the best way to reach you?
Give me an email, and that is donald.kinzler. I'll spell that because sometimes it would be easy to put an S in.
Yeah.
So it's donald.kinzler, Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. And I always enjoy seeing successes also. Mm-hmm. In fact, somebody just sent me a photo of a beautiful maple. Oh, just gorgeous. She has it professionally injected with iron, and she said it's worth every penny. And wow, the photo of that maple tree that is just in in orange. Yeah, I can see why she has it professionally treated. And so, yeah, I enjoy hearing successes. Yeah, so it's always fun to see what people are doing.
Gardeners, if this snowfall and cold has got you a little bit down, send on some pictures of what you enjoyed gardening this summer, and that'll cheer everybody up.
Hey, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Last night, because it's going to snow overnight, our peace rose had a wonderful bloom on it. And so I cut that, took that in, and sowed the last rose of summer. That's awesome.
Nice.
But, it's been such a long fall. I'm ready to let go.
Okay.
The end of October or November's right around the corner. I'm ready to let go. It was a good growing season. I don't feel cheated.
Good.
If we had killing frost the end of August, which sometimes we do, so I'm feeling very comfortable and satisfied.
And I think probably getting some moisture here in the fall before the ground's going to freeze.
Our lawn looked better now the last month or so than it did all summer long.
And hopefully that sets us up for a good spring.
Exactly. You bring up that wonderful point because we've talked about how the seasons roll into each other, and next year can depend on what happens now. And so I'm happy that there's adequate moisture going into the winter season.
Well, we don't have to wait till next spring to talk. We'll talk again next week.
We'll see you, everyone. Thanks for listening.